today we are very, very lucky to have Eliza Redmann come in and tell us about their work that they do. Eliza was an architecture student here when I first started teaching. And so I have watched transform from architecture to even sculpture, material studies, acoustical interventions, art, design, space. And so we've asked Eliza to come in multiple times over the last 5 years. And what everybody loves about this lecture is that it's hyper relevant to what you're doing with the reliefs. But it is so big picture. Eliza does such a great job of exposing her, she's so courageous in exposing her life, why she does what she does, how they got here. I mean, it's just all of these layers. What it means to start a business, what it means to make money, what it means to defend your self-care. So I really hope you get a lot out of today. Enjoy it. It's going to be amazing.
Oh, yay. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you, Sarah, for that wonderful introduction. Those were all the things I was about to say as I start. So I'm glad that you said them. Before I begin, is anyone getting a glare from any of the reflective materials on the table? No. Okay, good. Raise your hand. Let me know if that changes at any point. So as Sarah said, my name's Eliza Redmann. I am a full-time sculptural artist, and I hope that my presentation today can give you some perspective about what is possible with a career in design. When I started out, I had no idea this is where my life was going. I had a totally different path for myself picked out, and that's just part of living a creative lifestyle, is being able to pivot and think outside the box and really go in a new direction and build something for yourself that you could never have imagined prior. That's all part of creativity. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my creative journey. So starting out, I'm going to show you a few pictures of my life. So I live in Durham. My studio is in the basement of my home in Durham. My partner, Mikey, lives with me. He's featured here in a couple of photos. We love skiing together, and I love playing soccer. I play every Sunday morning and every Tuesday or Thursday. Who here said that they did soccer? Who was the soccer call-out person? I just want to who said that? Someone said something about soccer earlier. Well, anyway, I love soccer. We'll just leave it at that. We also have 3 animals together. We have these 3 little Yorkshire Terrier and Terrier mixes. The newest addition is Weaver, who's in the center here. We picked him up off the street. And then we have Nitro and Turbo. Yes, and Weaver is named after the street that we picked him up off of. In the bottom right, shout out to Marissa, who has come on this year as my studio manager. She's also one of my best friends, and I love watermelon is another aspect about me. And then I have to shout out also my cat Eleanor, who is a wonderful support animal who I adopted when I was a senior in undergrad and has been with me for the past 14 years. Yeah, it's been that long. Okay. Revealing my age right off the bat. So a little bit about myself and my journey to where I am now. So I graduated from the College of Design with my master's in architecture in 2016. Before that, I grew up in Wisconsin and Minnesota, moved down to do my career in architecture here. And after I finished my master's, I moved to Durham and I began working at a very reputable local architecture firm called Duda Payne Architects. And I was working there for about 2.5 years after graduation. And during that time, I was biking to and from work every day. I bought a home. I started renovating it while I was working full time, like they do on HGTV. I would not recommend doing that to anyone in case you're thinking about it. It was extremely stressful. Biking to and from work every day, playing soccer, studying for my architecture registration exams, and generally just enjoying being like a late 20-something. Like I had just finished like this massive arc of like undergrad, grad school, and I'm finally like, whoo, I'm like out of school and like in the real world. And one day I was driving down the street from my home to a soccer match, and a car was going through an intersection. A car coming the opposite way on the road came over into my lane, taking a left-hand turn that was very ill-judged, and they hit me head on, and I suffered a massive traumatic brain injury, and my life changed forever in that moment. So the next slide is going to be a photo of a wrecked car. So this is my vehicle, and then that was my brain. The light gray area here was blood. So blood had started pooling in the left side of my brain. And yeah, it changed my life forever. So in that moment, I was rushed to the ER and I was sort of told, like, you're going to be fine, like, go home and rest. But I think everyone sort of knew that wasn't necessarily the case. But I didn't know that. I thought I was going to rest and be fine. But what I found was that I was having a lot of issues with my balance, with being able to take care of myself, especially with my vision, and a lot of like overstimulation and dealing with just not being able to handle executive functioning and just feeling really, really overwhelmed all the time. And this was not a good situation for me as a 28-year-old. Like I just said, I had just like emerged out of grad school and I just spent all this money on my education. And now suddenly I can't do my career in architecture. So that's a really difficult spot to find yourself in as a late 20 something when you're kind of just coming out of the woods of school and financially not totally stable yet. So I basically took a little bit of time, well, actually quite a bit of time. That was about a year and a half where I was like fully disabled during that time period. And I kept trying to go back to my former career in architecture. I kept trying to make it work and it just wasn't. And so I just had to say, okay, there's no going back. I need to move forward. I need to find a way to move forward. And for that move, I turned to my creativity. And I said, I'm still a creative person. I can still create things with my hands. I can imagine things with my brain. How can I start to reinvent myself and recreate my life? So I had an idea, and the idea was this little sketch. So I sketched it out, and it was to make a paper sculpture that was made of 3 different modules. And those modules are these diamonds, so 3 different sizes of diamonds, and they have the off-center point in the middle. And I had no idea where this was going. I just thought, let's just make something and see what happens here. So I cut it out. I made it in SketchUp first, and then I used an X-Acto blade to cut it out. And this was the result. And I thought, that's pretty cool. I wonder what would happen if I hit a directional light on it. And this is what happened. And I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. So I posted that to my Instagram and I started getting all these responses from my community, design community, and other people being like, whoa, what is this? What are you doing? What is it? More, show us more. So these are some of the other study models or the other arrangements that I made with this study model. Now I want to step back for just a second and point out that I made it using the diagram that you see on the top here, which is where the cut lines are the red lines and the fold lines are the dashed lines. After I put all these together and glued all those seams up, I realized I could have made it using the diagram on the bottom and only glued one seam together. That would have been a lot easier. So it refined the way that I was working with paper at that time. But we're going to come back to this concept. So like I said, I posted these on the internet and I got all this response. So I thought, well, I'll just keep exploring, I'm on to it. I feel like this is going in a good direction. So I just explored the idea of a paper shape, a square paper shape, and rectilinear paper shapes, and triangular paper shapes, and hexagons. Now, to make these designs, I am working within the parameters of what I can do, which is I literally have 10 to 15 minutes where I can work on a computer before I start to feel hot and nauseous and I have to go lay down. So that's the amount of time that I had to work within. So I got in the programs and I made the modules within that time frame. That was just enough time for me to create a few modules and unfold them and print them out. And then when I could cut them out by hand and assemble them by hand, it was much less taxing on my nervous system. So it really was designing within the parameters of what I was capable of doing in that moment. So this is how I was doing it, printing out these templates, laying it over on sheets of paper, and cutting it out by hand. Now I found when I was doing this too, I could also flip over the paper shape and then create a reverse reflected image as well. So that was a unique discovery that I had no idea I was getting into. So as I mentioned, these are all paper modules. Does everyone understand the concept of what a module is? Okay, everyone feels pretty comfortable. In case you don't, modules are just components that are individual and self-contained, but when they're compiled, they can make more complex systems. So each one of these is an individual paper rectilinear module that then is combined to create, an overall composition. And at this point, I'm still cutting everything by hand, but I'm realizing that what I'm having is a little bit of a tolerance issue. Are we familiar with the concept of tolerance? Okay, so I'm gonna explain that really quick. So tolerance, because I'm cutting everything by hand, it's not totally accurate. You can only get so accurate when you're making things by hand. And so what could help me in this moment is using a machine to get more accurate. When I was cutting it by hand, I was basically 1/16th to 1/32nd off of what I wanted to be with every single cut, which isn't a big deal when you're talking about one module. But then when you start compiling all of these modules together, you can compile 16 together, everyone's off 1/16th of an inch, then you have 1 inch that you're off at the end of the day. And that wasn't gonna last. That wasn't gonna get me where I wanted to go in terms of creating pieces of artwork. Because at this point, I'm thinking, I wanna make an actual piece of artwork and I wanna see where that'll take me. So I hopped in a laser cutter and I was able to create these shapes. And then this was the composition that I made. Now, I didn't know what I was trying to accomplish at this point. I just knew that I was trying to create forward momentum for my life. I was trying to explore design. I was trying to work within my new limitations of life and just accept those limitations and work within them instead of resisting them and trying to do things that just really weren't for me, go down a path that wasn't for me. But at this point, when I put this together, I realized that what I'm doing with these modules is actually giving people a glimpse inside of what it's like for me to be experiencing the visual disturbances that I am after my traumatic brain injury. So really, I'm trying to give the viewer a glimpse inside of my experience by giving them this perplexing visual experience while they look at my artwork so that they can see what it might be like to be me. So I made all these and then it's like off to the races. I post them online. I start getting commissions from friends. I post more. I start getting commissions from strangers. And all of a sudden, I'm like building a full design brand out of this. Here's some other earlier pieces. This image on the left is actually the same design that's on the table right here. So if you want to take a look at that after, take a look at that. The one on the right is called Continuum. That was an exploration into continuing lines throughout the entire piece as one continuous line network. And at this point, I mean, you'll probably have noticed that I have not been showing any color in any of my designs. I was literally just exploring form, light, line, shadow, and the element of time throughout these. So the movement of the light over this, so integrating the time into this. We have a two-dimensional piece of work that's, just in the X and Y. We have three-dimensional, X, Y, and Z, and then we can also add that time element in as technically the fourth dimension of what you can explore in terms of design. So this piece explores what the direction of the shadow is. So basically, I'm putting the pink paper in the direction of where the shadow might hit on this piece. And this is my first commission that I ever did where I used color as a part of it. This piece is based on depicting neural networks. And here I'm using color to explore in more of a diagrammatic way. So basically, each of these nodes is a module, and where they connect to each other, those I'm using a solid blue to make that connection with a colored diamond. And the ones where they're sort of reaching for each other but not quite making it, I'm using void. So I'm using this just a basic line work around the edge and the color. And these are some other earlier pieces that I made. All of these are 24 by 36-inch pieces of art that I've sold. Or sold, I believe in 2021 was the year I made all of these pieces. The first one on the left is depicting Islamic architecture at Alhambra in Granada, Spain. The one in the middle and the right are both depictions of the visual disturbances that I've described already. Just some more examples here of what was possible. The one on the left here, I'm exploring paper. I'm exploring using paper, clearly. I'm also exploring using color and line work both combined. That was the first piece I'd done that with. The one on the right, I'm exploring shadow and void. And you'll notice there's a little a little glue dab here. I just want to point out that everything that you're seeing and everything you will continue to see here is imperfect. So, and that's going to be one of the key points that I come back to at the end of the presentation is that completion beats perfection. So every single time I'm more concerned with finishing the piece and like making it a complete thought, making it a complete exploration than I am with it being perfect. Because if I focused on every single piece being perfect, I would have never gotten this far, let alone where I'm about to show you. This was my biggest commission at the time for paper artwork. I have just surpassed it recently in terms of the revenue that it brought my business. And it explores using the colors from different spaces to connect both sides of this hallway. So unique one, because I wasn't just focusing on one piece of art and one expression, it was creating two pieces that speak to each other. So the blue is coming from the living room, and there are blue color accents in that space. So I'm basically taking the blue and covering that side of the piece to make this what's called a lenticular effect, coming from the living room through the hallway to the bedroom. And then I'm taking gold from the bedroom and doing the same thing coming the opposite way. Does anyone have any questions so far? Yes. So when I'm adding color, that's a great question. I'm using the machine that I'm using, which I moved from using a laser cutter to a paper cutting machine. So I use a Silhouette Cameo. There's also like a Cricut would be like the more well-known competitor of that. I like the Silhouette Cameo because it plugs right into Illustrator. But I'm cutting out the pieces of paper and I'm overlaying them onto the sides of the shape by using the exact same drawing, but making that a cut line instead of what would be like a fold line. Yeah, piece of paper overlay. hmm Any other questions? Don't be shy with your questions too. This is for your, I'm here for your benefit, so I want to answer them. Yes. hmm Yeah, you got it. It's actually that tripod that's right there. uh, yes. It depends on the shape. So the question is, when I'm gluing down the shapes, do I have tabs or do I have like a back to the shape? When I first started out, I was using just the edges of the shapes to glue those down into place. Now I create like tabs that go on the back side of those shapes. For these ones though, however, I fully enclose the shape itself. So I made like a actual piece on the that would fold over with tabs to make sure that whole piece is solid. So it depends on like the scale of the piece and the design and how well it'll hold together. I use Elmer's glue. Thank you for asking that. There are a couple applications where I've used Sobo glue in the past. So Sobo is a bit more flexible when it dries. So I was just telling Lyra before this presentation that I have an installation that is a wall installation in an accessory dwelling unit, which is does everyone know what that is? It's like a secondary living space behind a home. And it gets shut off in the winter. And so it gets very cold in there and it gets very hot in the summer. So that's important to know because every single material that we work with in general has expansion and contraction as it relates to the difference in temperature. And so I knew that these pieces are going to be expanding and contracting a little bit, even though it was plastic on the wall, and Elmer's glue would break off the wall. Whereas Sobo is more flexible. And so those pieces, have been doing well. Fingers crossed, they're doing well so far, and hanging on for several years on that wall. I will say, however, Sobo dries and it has a little bit of a yellowing to it when it dries. And Elmer's glue dries clear and opaque, so it just totally disappears. So all the work that you've seen so far has been Elmer's glue. I think you had a question, yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. So the question is, how am I managing moving the light so smoothly? That's literally me walking like so smoothly around the piece on the table with the clamp with my phone on it facing down. Like all those early ones were just taking with my iPhone. We'll talk about professional photography like in a little bit, but there are probably different ways to do that, but the setup was too complicated. So I took like 10 minutes of video just to get like the right smoothness and the right angle of the light on that. Yes. I use Nina printer paper, 110-pound Nina printer paper. So nothing special. Like this is all just like glue. Like my first studies were like a skein of paper that I inherited with the house when I bought it. Like it was in the basement. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna use that paper. Yeah, so that I use Canson Colorline or Canson Mi Tientes paper or something, some other equivalent. Yeah, so pretty basic. I typically try not to get down to like 60-pound paper. I try to keep it in the 110, 80 to 110 range. Just because sometimes when the glue is wet, it will deform the paper just a little bit, and I usually don't like the look of that. If you do find your glue is deforming, you can hit it with a hair dryer. It can help you dry it more quickly. Or another tactic that I use every single time is to lay out your glue to dry beforehand. The first thing you do when you get to your desk, lay your glue out to dry, and then come back and then use it with a toothpick when it's already tacky. So that's what I'm doing here is I'm getting tacky glue. This is all stuff I learned in Sarah's studio. Is using tacky glue, so making sure that it's partially dried, and then when you use it and the paper overlays go on, you don't have that deformation at all. Yes, I'm using Elmer's glue. Hmm. Yes. So you're talking about the design process and like how many iterations to make before you know you hit the final? Yeah, that's a good question. It's different for every project. All of the ones that I've showed you so far, except for this one, was like a one shot. Like, I'm just going to explore this. And then I made a piece out of it, you know? So I do that a lot where I just am like exploring a concept and I create an art piece out of. So every single one of these I consider like a design exploration. There are some projects, and I have a big project right now I'm working on where I will need to do multiple iterations. Um, yeah, I don't know if there's a specific number of iterations. It's more just I want to make sure that I feel good about covering all my bases, but not from a perfectionistic standpoint, but just like I want to make sure that when I make my decision, I feel that I have explored like all the different possibilities or at least a reasonable number of possibilities for this so that I feel confident enough in myself to choose the one that I want to go with. Um, Interestingly, I usually always pick one of the first ones, if not the first one that I made. But I think it's still worth, I mean, you'll find in design that it's still worth making those, if nothing else than to show the client, like, here's all the possibilities. Here's all the different ones that that we went through. And then they can see why you picked the one that you did, as opposed to saying, here's it, here's the one, this is it. And they're saying, well, wait, didn't you like, aren't there other options here? But if you go and you lay out all the options, you really show you did your due diligence, then that decision making process and the support of the final becomes a lot greater. Yes. No, all that is done by hand. The question is there's an automated way to cut the units? Is there an automated way to fold and assemble the units? And the answer is no. Repetitive work with your hands over and over while you watch a TV show is usually the best way for me, I found. Yes.
I don't know if I missed it, but why is it called poetry?
Yeah.
A form of poetry.
Yeah, that's a great question. So why is my brand name Folded Poetry? Because I think when you see the work, you can kind of tell like it feels a little bit poetic, but why choose that name? So I chose the name because I think around the point by which I made the piece that was called Wild Geese, which I forgot to tell you that was the name of, and I would like to tell you that because it's a great poem that you should all look up. Wild Geese by Mary Oliver, wonderful poem about creative living and creative life. Um, right around this point, I was posting this one and I asked my community online, like, I'm making all this stuff. I don't know what to call it. And someone who I basically crowdsourced the name. And someone I worked with at the architecture firm came up with the name Folded Poetry, and I just adopted it from there. And I like it because there's multiple layers, right? Is it like, are you folding poems? Like, is the poetry like the symbolic part of the name? There's a lot of like ambiguity, and I like that because the interpretation of the work is also very subjective and ambiguous too. So I think it very much aligns with the intention of the work. Yes. because I did the cut, the question is if I'm folding by hand, why are they so uniform? Because I'm pre-cutting the lines, so the score lines and the cut lines are already there. It's really, really easy to just fold it right along the lines. It's pre-prescribed basically. So this piece was cut as with a laser cutter, and all of the joints are already there. And so I'm just basically like folding them to their extreme in both directions, and then like adhering them together. So you can see the flaps here and how this one is secured together. Yes.
Do you make your own like diagrams to fold them, or do you find them?
No, everything I design is my own designs. I design them in SketchUp as like a three-dimensional shape first, and then I unfold it. Mm-hmm. Yes.
For your more like sculptural pieces, you do the same where you pick out like the final plan, got the unit actually associated with that, or
It's a lot of back and forth. So the question is, am I thinking about the whole thing or am I thinking about the units? That's the interesting thing because I'm working with modules, there's always that constraint. So I always am going back and forth between what the final will look like and what are the individual units that make that up, and are those individual units something that can be unfolded or are they too complicated? So it's always that little bit of push and pull between the design of the individual units and the overall expression that I'm going for.
back to the
Yes,
back to the iteration question. I think it's interesting because SketchUp becomes an iterative tool for you for developing the form of the unit
totally.
before it even comes to paper.
Yes, SketchUp is where I go first when I'm fleshing out a design because I'm trying to get a lot of ideas out there very quickly. SketchUp is great for that because it's infinite space and a very lightweight program. Yes. I actually flatten them in SketchUp. I make like a grid, like a three-dimensional grid space, and I take each piece and group the individual facets, and then I unfold each one. There's probably ways to do that a lot easier. It's just like what I have dedicated the time to learn how to do. I know other programs can unfold things, and I intend to learn them actually next year when I'm on an artist residency. But right now, that's what I do. Yeah. Okay. Gonna keep on keeping on then. So I did a color exploration series. There's a few models up here that you're gonna see in the images here. And the goal here was to explore how do you allow someone to perceive color when you don't actually see the color directly. So for instance, here are two examples of that. There's a third one on the table, and you can come take a look at these afterward. I hope you will. But the idea is, yeah, so we're revealing the color itself, the color paper itself, but we're still allowing the viewer to perceive it. So here's a study model I made, the first one I made for a large project, which I'll show you. This one is on one of the ones on the table here. And I was exploring with these, what is the best way to make the color perceivable? Because some of them do it better than others. But a lot of these are pretty good. This one I decided against almost immediately after making this paper model because I realized that there's no great way to secure both of those points in which they connect and still allow the top to be stable. So that was sort of like even making the paper model, which is why we make paper models, to see how the materials come together and to see what's actually possible. It's like if you can't make it work with paper, like, you know, the expression work with paper, you're not gonna be able to make it in real life size. So after this, I made these 4 study models where I was exploring, you know, can these work on a large scale and what actually is the scale that I want to make them at? And I'm using the actual material that I will use for the installation here. And then this is the final product. So the client is Ellen Castley and Frank Conhouse. So Ellen Castley is an architect in Durham. I know her through volunteering with the design community in Durham. I stayed at their place for an artist residency while my home and studio was under renovation, and because they found that my house had a bunch of mold in it while I was recovering from my brain injury. Isn't that lovely? So anyway, I was up against quite a bit during that time frame. It's no wonder I was dealing with disability for as long as I was. But I was staying with her, And part of my stay was to create artwork for their home together. So they have a artist gallery space that is like a bridge that connects an accessory dwelling unit with their main home. And this was in the clear story space of their accessory dwelling unit. And they chose, they chose which one of those they wanted to go with and what the expression was going to be. Yes. So this, I actually used Elmer's glue to make the connection. So I actually used just adhesive to make that connection. And because it was paper, it stuck really well. The one I was telling you about earlier with the Sobo, that was actually a plastic material that I used. So I knew that Elmer's wasn't going to cut it. But Elmer's does wonderful with paper. Yes. Yeah, that's a great question. The question is, how is the color reflected out? So the color is underneath the shapes here. And then it's just the ambient light that bounces in that then is reflected out that allows you to perceive the color. What's that?
Refracted onto a surface, like even if it isn't glass.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right. So yeah, cool design series, and I love this hidden color concept, and I have another project that I'm working on right now which uses it. And then of course at night it takes on a totally different life. So I love that about this design. And then I had a client who really wanted a paper piece. She loved this installation on the wall, and she said, I want a framed piece of art that is the same design. So this is what I was able to achieve, making her kind of a modified framed piece of art. And here's a couple other hidden color exploration models, which were both commissions. Actually, the one on the right here is Albert McDonald's commission that his partner commissioned for him for Christmas 3 years ago. It's how we first got connected. All right, so I want to walk you through a design proposal here. So client comes to me, in this case, it's an art agency. So I started working with art agencies. I'm working with individual clients, and I'm working with like corporations for private installations and also nonprofits. So in this case, an art agency comes to me and they said, we have a client who wants two pieces inspired by brutalism. And we have, I think it was like a $500 budget. So I was like, okay, I really want to work with this company. I don't know if that's quite enough money, but for what they're going to get, but I really want to work with them because I want to get my foot in the door. So I came up with this design proposal. So I explored this building, which I studied in architecture school, called La Tourette. It's by Le Corbusier. It's in France. And I made a series of study sketches based on the imagery of the building. I haven't actually visited the building, though I'd like to at some point. And then I created a SketchUp model that incorporated some of these motifs that were from the building. And then I sent this to the client and said, this is what I'm going to make. Can I get client approval? And they said yes. And it lives at Le Méridien Hotel in San Francisco now. And this is the final piece and how it turned out. Or it's actually two pieces that live in a hallway in that hotel. All right, before I pivot, I'm going to be starting to talk about acoustics. Does anyone have any other questions? Yes. Transportation, that's a good question. So today I put everything in that plastic box that you see there and brought it here. So not very carefully when it's samples. So otherwise, if it's larger pieces, I basically sub that work to different organizations. So in Durham, there's a company that's a mom and pop shop on 9th Street. Is anyone from Durham here? Okay, I was just curious because I'll tell you about it later. But anyway, there's a place called Durham Pack and Ship. It's a small local shop. I've had really good success with them over like FedEx and UPS and these other like bigger companies. I feel like they don't take as much care. So I basically sub everything to them. I bring the piece to them fully completed. They provide me a quote for how much it's going to cost, and I forward that quote to the client and say, if you want it shipped, here's the price of shipping. If it's a new client or a special circumstance, sometimes I will include shipping, and then I'm trying to find the lowest price possible, or extend the time frame in which it might arrive. But I sub out the packing and shipping, and then what that does also though is that I have to pay insurance on it to make sure it gets there safely. And if it doesn't, I need to have that insurance. So okay, so one of the other effects from my brain injury that I sort of touched on earlier but didn't get into that much is this idea of overstimulation. So what I found after my TBI, traumatic brain injury, is that when I would go into spaces in downtown Durham, that they are beautiful spaces that are brick and wood aesthetics. However, that would mean that the space was just so incredibly loud. There was so much ambient noise in those spaces. So yes, okay, seeing some nods. Like, I'm not the only one who deals with this, and this is what I found as I started talking about it, is that these spaces are beautiful to be in aesthetically, but functionally, it's like you have like a limited time where you can be in there, or you might be eating dinner with someone and you find, I'm just really uncomfortable right now and I don't know why. And it's like, wow, I can't even like focus on my thoughts right now because I can't even hear my own thoughts, let alone thoughts or what the person across the table is actually saying to me. So I was making these designs with paper and I just kept thinking, based on what I know about acoustics, is like the acoustic noise waves are hitting the wall and then they're bouncing back in a certain direction. That's what's causing the noise. So what I thought is these paper models would do so well for dispersing noise because they have so many directionally scattered surfaces. Like all of these surfaces, when the noise waves hit this, it's going to be bouncing in a bunch of different directions. And I thought that is really good in itself, but if I could pair this with a noise deadening material, I would have a really viable acoustic product. And this is as much for me as it is for design exploration. I'm like, I want to make a world where I can fit in better and I wouldn't even say fit in better, but I want to make a world that accommodates me and is more accessible for people like me, because I know that I'm not the only person that deals with this. So for this piece, uh, I used cardboard as the substrate, and I used a velvet flocking material. I laid those cardboard pieces flat and upside down, and I cut them out of the flocking material, and then I folded them up and assembled them together. So you can see on the right here that there are these seams on each piece, and this is because that's exactly how I assembled it, is using these seams. So I moved that to a larger scale. You can see that process right here, and my partially dried glue and my Elmer's glue. And I assembled it to make this piece, which is called Interruption. And it's a little bit larger scale, but still I'm having this seam there. And I don't really have like a great way to like individually mount these. These are like concave shapes that don't really have a backside to them. So I was looking for a design idea that would do something more like this, which is like these individually mounted elements that then could create this really unique pattern on the wall, but that they wouldn't rely on a substrate, a backer board to get me there. So I knew that's what's gonna sell as a product, right? And I just want to point out too that I just had this dream of like making an acoustic product. I had no idea how to get there. I just thought if I just move in this direction and start producing the thing that I want to produce and want to, manifest in this world, that opportunities will open up for me. And that's exactly what did happen. So here you can see I'm covering these with the velvet flocking and then I'm folding them up. However, what I noticed was that, I'm still having this seam. This is the final installation. So I feel like, on its face, I'm like, this works really well. But the problem was this, that because this material, this velvet flocking material is tensile material, so it stretches, when I was laying it flat, putting the material over it, and then folding it up, and then securing that seam, that material just wanted to pull itself apart. Like those shapes just wanted to come right apart, like you can see here. It just wants to crack right apart. And that's because of that tension of that material. So I had this material issue that I was dealing with, which is like, okay, how do I create these shapes that function in the way that I want to and actually stay together? So I'm going to go back to the original design concept here that I came up with when I was first starting to show up for myself through design. And I'm going to look at this again because I feel like there was something here. So I started right now I'm making the pieces like this, but what if I started to make them like this, where I was treating this like a takeout box. I would open in all directions. That way the joint would be self-contained. And then from there, what if I stretched fabric over that? So here's an example of what I was exploring. So for instance, here I'm cutting this on a laser cutter. But what I don't like about this is that these joints then are very, there's this beveled edge that is exposed here. And I was thinking when I stretch fabric over it, right, that's going to be able to be seen. And I don't really want that geometry. That's not really part of the design expression I'm going for. So what I did was I flipped this over and I actually crushed those seams and folded the piece onto itself to create a nice clean seam here. And when that came together, I was able to stretch fabric over it and create these more seamless shapes. So here's a video of me doing that. So I have my cardboard diamond and I'm taking my fabric, laying it over, stretching it over, and I'm hitting it with a heat gun. And that's also just Elmer's glue that I'm using right on there. Using a roller to put the glue on, and then I'm cutting it out from the fabric and stapling up the edges. And I did this at a makerspace that is an RTP. So this is during deep COVID. This is probably 2021. And I just started going to this makerspace and talking with the main maker there and saying, I have this idea, let's figure out how to make it work. And once we did that, this was the final result. So at this point, I'm like, okay, I have something here. Like I can make acoustic shapes. Like this is really, really great for me and the direction that I'm wanting to go with my business. At the same time, I'm starting to learn about design licensing, and it's starting to like percolate in the back of my mind that there may be opportunities for me to grant the rights for these designs for other people to produce, which is something I'll talk about in just a little bit. But for now, I'm just wanting to continue to explore different acoustic design expressions. Does this look familiar? Now, just hopping right over to this before we go on with acoustics, I have this other installation that I've done with this design, and this is in New York City. This lives at the headquarters of a big construction firm. This job I was able to land through a company called Art Lifting, which is an art agency who exclusively represents artists who have experienced disability or currently experience disability. So I got connected with them early on, and they were able to bring me some of my biggest projects that I have to date. So that was a really great development for me in my business. So these are acrylic gold diamonds. There's one on the table here that was causing some people some grief before. It's very shiny and reflective. There's just one hole on the back, so all these are from an individual mount point, and they're high enough up off the ground that no one can really reach them to take them off. But the idea here is that this space is in almost like a space like this where it's fully enclosed and there's no natural daylight. So the idea here is creating an art installation that acts as its own light source in a lot of ways, and that it's super reflective and super visually interesting to make the space appear more light-filled and naturally luminous. Any questions? Yes. Yes, you. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I definitely considered those options. However, I wasn't sure in terms of like reproducing multiples, how labor intensive those would be. So that's always part of the design calculation for me, is it's not just how to get the best product. It's also about what is the price of producing that product? How many person hours does it take to produce that product? What is the expense of the material that it takes to produce that product? Can I get a consistent result with that materials? For instance, carving, like that would have to be machine based. Well, then how much time would it take on a machine to carve that out? So as I'm learning more about the industry and I'm learning more about what it takes to make products, then my constraints become greater and greater, right? And then I'm designing within like, a small, volume of constraints that I really need to like think. And that's where the design comes in, right? That's where the creativity comes in, just as it did kind of on a macro level with my life, was like, I have constraints now. How do I create something within that? That's for every single design project. What's the space like? What's the budget like? What material am I using? Like how easily cuttable is that material? How expensive is it? All those things create an ecosystem that the design happens within. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, that's a great question. We did have trouble with alignment, and if I were to redo this, I wouldn't do it like this again because we had those alignment issues. And what I would change about this specifically is I would make the joint between these bigger, because right now it's too small. And it's too small. It was maybe an inch between each shape and its neighbor. And I found that wasn't enough, because if if you weren't totally accurate with the screw hole, so we had the sheets of paper that were the template that we taped together and we put on the wall, and then we drilled in the screw holes, and then we individually mounted them. But there was some variability because every time you're drilling a screw hole in, if you're not exactly perpendicular to the wall, you're going to have a little bit of variation. Also, the template, I did not produce a template for this one, my fabrication partner did, and I did not make every single one of these. I'm partnering with fabrication partners at this point to produce some of this work. So not only am I designing within these constraints, I'm also designing within the constraint of what can this other person do in their shop as well. But the design template that he produced had like a big gray hole for the point instead of like an X, right? So then you're like asking people to drill in perpendicular to the wall at some point that's like at the center of this like gray quarter. So there was variability there that needed to be addressed, that, you know, next project won't be the same. Yes.
Do you think like one of those diamonds, like when brought up the sides, it would actually be a pretty cool looking building?
Yeah, I think that would be great. I would love to make a building with some of these designs at some point. I'm hoping that I'll at some point get, you know, brought in for a project to do more form-based studies for buildings and do schematic design for buildings. I think that'd be very cool. Okay. So moving on with acoustics. I had at this point kind of invented the wheel myself using the cardboard and the fabric, but I was just thinking, you know, I started getting these questions from architects that I was reaching out to, and they said, well, what's the NRC rating? What's the noise reduction coefficient rating of this material? And I was like, well, I don't know. I just like kind of made up my own process for making this. I don't really have that. But I thought if I can get my hands on some noise reducing material that already has a noise reduction coefficient associated with it, then I will be in business. And it actually happened really serendipitously that I got this material. My friend was working on a building in Raleigh, and one of the caseworkers, the people who made the shelves and the cabinets for that building, was based in Durham. And she went over to do a site visit, and she found that they had all of this acoustic material that they were throwing away. And she said, why are you throwing this all away? Like, this is expensive material. And they said, well, we had to make an insurance claim on it because the outside of the boxes were damaged. Well, the inside was wrapped in plastic. And so there was really no reason. They just had to do it for the insurance purposes to like get rid of all this material. So she called me, and I met the guy, and he said, just take as much as you want. So I took a bunch of this material, and I was like, score, because this is like expensive material to buy online. Like that was a major barrier for me. It was like, how much do I want to invest in just like messing around with a very expensive material to figure out a design process? But now I have as much as I want. And I found that it can be cut on a CNC router. I also found that it can be better cut using a drag knife on a CNC cutter, which is something I'll show you later. But I decided to explore this design, but the constraint was that this material had all these holes in it. So it's like, okay, well, what the heck? How am I gonna like, you know, make a design that works with these holes? So I actually created a design in SketchUp that utilized this hole pattern and worked around it. And I created the paper model in the middle. And then I created the piece that's on the right. But what I had available to me was the CNC router with a rotating bit. So this is literally a drill bit that is rotating, that's moving to cut the material. And it wasn't compatible with this material. It was burning the material. So that's why I'm throwing it on the ground. I'm like, okay, this isn't gonna work. However, I did go back to the drawing board, and I found a design that does work with the material. And that was this design for these modular elements, 2 different modules that notch together to create a screen. So this is me working in my studio in the basement of my home. And this is the result, was the screen concept. So I really, really like this design, and I love what it's doing. I showed this piece at 310 Gallery in Raleigh, I think in 2022. And so at this point, I take all of my designs that I've explored with acoustics in mind, and I populate an email newsletter, which is something I've been doing throughout this entire process so far. Is every month or every 2 months, I'm continuously collecting emails from people who land in my inbox for projects, people I'm working with on projects, my friends, my family, everywhere I go for networking, any art events I go to. Hey, you want to join my newsletter? Like, here's some work that I do. Or people that are aware of my work. Oh, I love your work. Okay, hey, you want to join my newsletter? So at this point, I think right now I probably have like 900 people on my newsletter. And it has been totally invaluable to my business to be able to reach people like that, because I was posting on the internet to start, but at that point, Instagram was still very friendly to posts that didn't have a face in them, but not so much anymore. If you don't have your face in it, Instagram or TikTok aren't going to really show it to anyone. And that's because it's a rented platform. Like, I'm basically like renting the use of this space from someone else. When I have someone's email address, I can email them forever and I can reach them forever. And all they have to do is click to open that email. That's a lot more powerful than renting space from a platform that could be there one day and could not be there the next day, right? So how much energy and investment I put into these things, it varies on what I can get back out of it. In this case, I put all of my acoustic ideas into my email newsletter and I shot it out to my community. And somebody from a networking event I had met 6 months earlier that I don't even remember meeting replies and says, wow, this is great. I'm going to forward this to this company I work with, and this company is called Unica Vev, and I'd never heard of this company before. But I look into them, and they're like a national acoustic product company. And so before I know it, I'm meeting with their sales rep. I'm showing him some of the prototypes that I've made. He's really interested in that gray piece. He's interested in the diamonds, and he forwards my work to the president of the company. And I'm now on a call with the president of the company and their lead fabricator in Texas, and we're talking about creating a product line together. So now I want to explain what design licensing is. Does anyone know what design licensing is already? Okay, it's not a concept that is very widely discussed or taught, but it's a really important business model that you should know about. Design licensing is when I say, Lyra, sorry, got it this time. Okay, I'm gonna get it next time. So Lyra, you have a business and you produce, let's say you produce t-shirts. Okay, well, I make designs. I sketch designs, okay? I sketch cool designs. I create what's called surface pattern design. So I create designs that can be tiled and continued in all directions infinitely. And I use that, sketching and Illustrator, and I create these patterns, okay? Now I'm gonna approach you and say, hey, look at Lyra, you have this t-shirt business. Why don't you consider using my designs on your t-shirts? And oh, also you make shower curtains as well, and you also do like pillow throw covers or whatever. And you say, that's great. Okay, now I'm going to use your design, and every time I sell it, I'm going to pay you a royalty on the sale. So because I'm using your design, or because you're using my design, you're going to sell the pieces, and I get a cut of every single sale. So in this case, we're doing the same thing for acoustics. So I am licensing my designs to this acoustic company to use. And then every time they make a sale, which they usually make these big volume sales, I get a percentage of that sale. So in my case, my royalty agreement is for 5% of whatever they sell. That's my design of the product. So that's a great way for me to make passive revenue, because they have sales reps that they employ that are out there working to sell to make their cut all the time, but they're also like working for me, right? Because they're out there trying to sell this product, but I get a cut of the sale. So design licensing is something I highly recommend looking into as young creatives. I think, as I mentioned before, it's not something that's very well known about, but it's a huge, huge industry. And especially if you're a 2D artist in surface pattern design, surface pattern design is huge. If you are interested in that, I recommend looking at this woman. Her name is Bonnie Christine. She has a podcast called The Professional Creative, and she talks all about surface pattern design and how she's built like a 7-figure business based on surface pattern design. But in my case, I'm trying to figure out how to do design licensing for sculptural elements. So how is that possible? That's a whole other design challenge that I'm working within. So what are products that are sculptural that I can license my designs for? So right now, it's mostly acoustic. In the future, I'm looking at, cast materials, like what are cast panels for the exterior of buildings? What are metal materials for the exterior of buildings? This is always something that's on my mind, is like keeping my eyes open, keep my head up, and looking for these opportunities that I can use my sculptural elements to create products with. So in this case, we created 3 different shapes. We created hexagon, a diamond, and a triangle. I'm sure you'll recognize the diamond design, back to basics. And then each of these, one is centered, and then one is off-centered for each shape. And then when they come together, they make these really cool designs. So this is a rendering of what is possible with this product. So this is on the Unica Vev website. They're currently making sales on it. They just had a big order in Chicago, and I just got my first ever royalty payment from this product line, like 2 days ago, yesterday, which is huge, right? Yeah, go me. Yeah, thank you. Yes. Feels very big and profound. I also have a licensing deal with that company, Art Lifting, that I was mentioning before, who represents artists with disabilities. For that, we're doing the same shapes, but with their cast shapes. So these are cast out of rockite and resin. So they are taking the lead on the production. I make the design. They work with their clients to get the leads and to get the sales. They get a cut of the sales. And then they work with the fabrication partner to create the designs. And I basically don't do anything as part of that process. So this is one example with the acoustics, that other example with cast materials. Here's another example of how that material, that design can look with this material on the wall. I did bring an example of what this material is. This is the gray material that I showed earlier for the screen design, and this is the same material that is used for this product line. It's called PET. It's acoustic noise deadening felt, and it's made from recycled plastic bottles that are made into felt. So I think it's 80% or 85% recycled content. So it's also a very sustainable material to use. Don't ask me about microplastics with it though. I don't know the answer to that, and I also don't want to know the answer to that. Okay. Another design using these shapes. These are all renderings. And then my first installation using this. So this is this place called ReCity in Durham. ReCity is a co-working nonprofit space for connecting other nonprofits together, and this is in their main event space. So this is used for yoga, this is used for church on Sundays, it's used for weddings, used for city council debates. It's a multi-use space, and it's been really great to have my work there. And I forgot to include in here, but I was recently featured in Durham Magazine and in front of this piece. So if you pick up the August or September version of Durham Magazine, you'll see me with this piece in it, which is super exciting. Here's some more images of it. All right, before I move on, any questions so far? Yes. Yeah, so this was a negotiation with the fabricator. So they were basically saying, this is how we have to make it. And I had to compromise on it. Be like, it's not my favorite, but it works. And there haven't really been a lot of complaints about it. I think it was more, for me, it's more of like my ideal, and then what is the compromise to make it work? There's always that. So kind of relinquishing that perfectionism a little bit to get me there. And I'll actually show the process of this material being cut in a future slide. And I'll show you the way that it can also be bent on itself because of these bevels. Yes. So they are either attached using adhesive backing, which is, so there's two pieces. There's like this front piece, and then there's a hole in the inside, a vacant space in the inside, and then they're attached to a back piece with using adhesive. And that back piece is cut completely separately in a separate sheet, and that whole sheet has adhesive back on it. Or if it doesn't have adhesive back on it, then it's a product that can be installed using a nail gun. So that's what I did with the ReCity installation, is I used a nail gun for the first time in my life and figured it out. And it was easy, actually. Okay. All right, so I showed you a bit of this design earlier. It's right here. I created this design for a design camp I was asked to teach at a couple of years ago. And this was for disadvantaged youth that were between the ages of, I think, 11 and 15 in Durham. And this opportunity didn't pay very well, but I thought this is a great opportunity for me to use this deadline to create a new design concept that then I can probably produce something entirely new with, and maybe take and create new design ideas with. So I use this opportunity to create this cubes design. I showed you the 3 templates. They're on the table here. This is the cubes design. This is also the cubes design, but made using these voids on the exterior facets. And then these are here. So take a look at those after. And here's some images from the workshop. So these 2 people worked together over here to create a group sculpture. And then these were some of the finals. And then here's me with the workshop afterward. It was a fun day. I sold these as a DIY kit for a while. So I made it so that you could create your own sculpture. And then I just said, you know, I really want to make this on a large scale. I want to make this using that PET material that I mentioned earlier. So I worked with a fabrication partner that's the same fabrication partner who does the acoustic product line. But I said, let's do something cool together outside of that. And we both collaborated to make this design into a PET cubes. So these are full-scale architectural cubes, and they live at the Cameron Museum of Art in Wilmington. At a current exhibit that they have, this is up right now. So if you go to Wilmington between now and October, this is at the Cameron Museum until then. And what I love about this is that they're really playful, and you can literally walk through them and move them and interact with them. And just like the acoustic product, they have void on the interior. So everything in the inside of these is completely void. So what that allows the project to do is the noise hits it, it's either refracted in a number of directions, it's either absorbed by the material, or it passes through the material to the inside and then gets trapped there. So they function acoustically in a number of ways, which I think is really interesting. And you can see the joints here, how they came together. We used these, well, actually, this was 100% fabrication partner. I produced the design files and he figured out, okay, how do we make this come together? So a lot of this, again, is like figuring out, okay, what does this design professional have in terms of tools in their toolkit, and the designing within that, within the tools that I have in my toolkit. Any questions? You guys good? Okay, keep going then. And this is an image of the actual cutting happening here. So this is a drag knife. So you can see here, these chunks are kind of being flecked off, and that's because this is being cut using a knife that's at an angle. And I think a couple of passes. So there's like a straight cut, and then there's these beveled cuts. And you can see here with this video that I'm actually bending it the opposite direction to make this connection. So here I'm bending it so that the seam on the outside is the way that I wanted it to be. So that's another opportunity to kind of play with that material and potentially do a project in the future like that, where it's more seamless and doesn't have that beveled edge on it. Okay, so now we're moving into Milan Design Week, which is where I attended a trade show in Milan this past April. And am I wearing the exact same outfit as I am in this photo? Probably, yes, I am. So for this trade show, I created some new designs. So at this point, I'm using only like straight lines and straight connections of straight lines to make these geometries. But in this collection, I wanted to explore the idea of curves for the first time. So this design is called Curls. It's made out of leather. I actually tapped in Jake and Emily. So I think you guys know Jake Heffington. He's a professor. Yes. Okay. So he's actually in my cohort from NC State. We graduated the same year and went through grad school together. So he's a good buddy of mine. And he has his fabrication studio in Durham. And with him and Emily, we came up with this way to make this design using leather. I had originally made this design using paper. So it's just one single, and I wish I had brought one. Yes, I did bring one with me. It's one individual shape that then folds on itself either this way or the back way. And then with its neighbors, it just joins right with its neighbors. So it's a really, really simple design. Like I said, I made it out of paper. I thought of it on a Saturday night. I went to the studio the next morning on Sunday, and it took me 2 attempts to make the design that you see here. It was like, boom, one, okay, that's, the joints are too loose. Okay, boom, another one. And it was like basically there. So that goes back to the iteration, right? Like sometimes it's like I go through multiple passes to see what the right answer is, and sometimes it's just like right there, like it already exists in my mind. I just like kind of like birth it into reality. And in this case, the leather is just being folded in one direction or the other to create this alternating pattern. This other design is called Bubble, and this is in front of you on the table here. And this is made from 2 different modules that come together. Let's see if I can pull this apart. I don't want to damage this. Yeah, so this is acrylic. And it's iridescent acrylic. There you go. Okay, so 2 different modules. Like this, and they just notch together. So this is the same design that I showed you earlier with the gray felt material that didn't work for this material, but I loved the design. And when I decided I'm doing this curves collection, I was like, okay, I have an application for this now. So feel free to come and play with this after. I'm gonna take this apart again. I have an installation I'm doing with this next week, actually, for someone's bathroom. They wanted this to fill their bathroom wall, which is very cool. This piece I brought to Milan, very cool. I used a very simple clip system for the back of it. I actually bent I wish I had included that in here, but I was trying to figure out how to make this stick on the wall. And so what I ended up doing was just having some holes, some simple holes in the back, and where these two meet, I used a binder clip, you know, the black ones with the silver edges that come as silver wings that come down. And I took those silver wings off and bent them out and just used it to make the connection to the wall. So it's just like a really easy place on. And then the next design, another leather one. This one's called domes. And these are individual pieces that are just individually mounted and can ship flat, and use that for Milan. Now, the design constraint for this design fair, which is, let me tell you about the design fair first. So this is part of Milan Design Week. Milan Design Week is based on Salone de Mobile, which is the world's largest interior design trade show. And it happens every single year there. Within Salone de Mobile at the fairgrounds in Milan, which is huge and beautiful, there is a subsection called Saloni Satellite. And that is a showcase of the work of designers who are under 35 years old. So this was my last year that I could attend. I'm 35 right now. I knew I was turning 35. If I applied this coming year, I wasn't going to be able to attend. And so I just like made it work. Like I tapped to my friends. I said, let's make this happen. I want to work with leather. Super interesting material, and also a continuation of the exploration into using soft materials. So technically these qualify as acoustic design. However, for me, you know, it was an expensive investment. And so what I decided is, instead of shipping all my materials abroad, which would in itself be probably $1,500 one way if I want to ship everything, I decided I was just gonna try to fit everything in my suitcase. So here's my whole booth and me at my booth in Milan. And here is everything I brought for 2 weeks there. So it had all of my clothes, all of my belongings, all my supplies, all of my artwork, and all of my tools used to put everything up, and all the paper templates that I'd printed out for this. I actually fit everything and I had extra space. The problem was that everything was a little too heavy. So I had to make my checked bag meet the 50 pounds. So that means I put everything in this little overhead bin bag, which was like, I swear, like 95 pounds. I was like lifting that thing like up to put it in the overhead bin. Not good, but great opportunities there. So trade shows are great to connect with people who you wouldn't otherwise connect with. They're a great way to go and meet people for licensing deals, or meet people who want products for their shop, or meet people who are interested in just purchasing artwork for their clients, like interior designers. So I think with trade shows, this is the second one I've done. Great opportunities, but it can be very, very intense. This one was 6 days straight. I was on my feet from 8:30 to 6:30 every single day at my booth, meeting people and talking to people. And I think I took a lunch. I think I ate at my booth most days. I like went grocery shopping at night and like made lunch like at night or in the morning and like ate at my booth, so I could like not miss any people. But this is great. I mean, this is great for my business. I feel like, especially now as I'm moving into the holiday seasons, being able to have all these people on my email list who are going to see my offerings is pretty invaluable. All right, so quickly I'm going to talk about what's coming up in this holiday season, which is based on this piece. So this piece is a piece of artwork that lived on the street on Franklin Street, outside of the Graduate Hotel in Chapel Hill during the summer of 2023. And it was part of this public art festival called the Uproar Public Arts Festival. Now, the festival itself had some issues, so I didn't feel like it was great for paying artists. I didn't think it was great for exposure. Like, there were a lot of issues with it, but I produced this great piece of work for it. And after the show was over, I was kind of dismayed, like, oh, maybe that wasn't worth my time. Like, maybe it was just like a waste of my money. However, come the holiday season, 2023, I'm realizing I have all of these individual diamonds from this art installation, which, by the way, did a wonderful thing on the sidewalk. So for this piece, it was not only just about what is visible above head, it's also about the extension of the artwork to the surrounding environment. So when the sunlight hit this piece, it casts this like glistening shadow, these cast these glistening reflections all the way around onto the street and sidewalk around it. So it was sort of like, where does this iridescent cloud actually stop? Is it just with the artwork? The whole experience is surrounding it. So it was a really interesting, created a really interesting dialogue on art and reflection, and where does art end and where does it begin? But I was able to take all of these individual diamonds and package them up and add a number out of 100 and sell them as pieces of a public artwork that I had worked on. So I was able to sell all 100 of these that year. I think I actually had 111. I sold like a few more than 100. But I thought, I just thought, whatever, I'll just try to sell them and see what happens. And I sold all of them, and I was like, wow, this is great. Like, maybe I should be selling like merchandise, like, I don't know, I should figure something out here. So last year, I also sold diamonds, and I made them out of iridescent acrylic. So this is my iridescent acrylic diamond or my iridescent acrylic ornament from last year. Does anyone want to guess how many of these I sold last year? 1,000,000. That's insane. Maybe one day.
100.
Okay, so I was hoping to sell 300 and actually sold 458 of them, which is great. And then this year, I'm like way ahead of the game, because last year I'm like marketing it in October, doing photography and marketing in October. And I'm like, this is way too late. And people are telling me, I want to buy these, but we already committed to this other artist to like create pieces. So this year I did it, all of the design in July, prototyping in July, and then photography in August, and then just launched these in August. And this is my design for this year. So this is called the Galaxy ornament. I have 2 of them on the table in front of here, in front of you. And what I love about this design is that it has continuous line work that continues from the circular to the diamond to the prong elements. So take a look at that when you come down after. I'm going to invite everyone to come down and take a look at all these samples afterward. What I really like is that there is this continuous line work that just goes throughout the whole piece, and that's something I really wanted to explore. Another thing I wanted to explore is the idea that up until this point I had only been working with 90-degree angles. So things, this material, when it cuts on a laser cutter, which is how I'm cutting these, it produces this really clean edge that's perpendicular to the face. So I had only been using 90-degree angles. So you'll notice that last year's it had like 4 pieces that notched together at 90-degree angles. But this year I wanted to explore the idea of creating things at 45 degrees. So this is where I included this 45-degree angle bit into there. So that's like totally new and exciting for me, is like exploring more of how this material, even though it is sort of rectilinear when it's cut, how it can be used to create more interesting geometries. And I inscribed my signature and my brand and the year into it too. So you can see how I've done that on different faces. Signature felt a little weird, but it was specifically requested because the acoustic company actually buys a whole bundle of these and gifts these to their sales reps every year. So they really wanted my signature on it. So yeah. All right, one more item here before I kind of wrap up. This piece, it lives in Colorado Springs. It was designed, I'm not going to get so much into the design process here. It's made using painted MDF board, and it represents a journey to Pikes Peak. Has anyone been to Colorado Springs before? Yes, cool. So, I mean, beautiful city, and it's just right in you can see Pikes Peak from there. And there's also, what is it? Devils? I can't remember. There's this really beautiful park in front of it. I'm gonna think of it after. But basically, I created this piece for them and installed it on the site. The corner condition was super difficult to figure out, but I got it. And this slide is mostly just to point out to you the difference between photography on my cell phone and professional photography. So can everyone see how different those look? Same subject matter, totally different images. So I would say, like, as you're continuing to grow and develop as designers, take the time. Like, I know you're going to be so exhausted after your reviews and your design reviews, but do take the time to get good photography of your work immediately after you make it, because someone could come up and bump into it and knock it over, and then it's just like, it's never going to be the same. Or you're going to take it home and think you're going to do it next week, and then all of a sudden it's 6 months later and it has dust and it's deforming because of the moisture in your basement or whatever it is. And so I highly recommend tapping into a friend who knows how to use a good camera, or even better, get to know how to use a good camera yourself so that you can capture your work in a really beautiful way. Because all the pieces that I've shown you so far that have been like the ooh and ah moments, I mean, those are all like, I mean, a lot of them I took on my phone for the paper pieces, but most of the, like all the big scale, large scale work, those are all professional photography items that I have invested into. So that's a really important aspect. As you go through the world and you're thinking about buying products, you know, you don't see on websites images that people have captured on their iPhones, right? Like everything is marketed and purchased online these days. And if your online presence is not, you know, at a certain level, it's going to be a lot harder for you to make the sales and to really be like stand out from the crowd. So whether it's portfolio or you're building a product website or you're doing marketing, whatever it is, like take the time or the money it takes to invest in some good photography. Highly recommend it. Okay, I have an upcoming project for City Hall. So I got contracted recently to produce acoustic artwork in City Hall in Durham. So I will be producing sculptural artwork in the atrium space of City Hall, which is a huge project for me. It's my first solo project as a sculptural artist and my first solo public art project as a sculptural artist. And I'll be working with city staff members to survey them about their design ideas for the space. And then I'll be producing design iterations, many design iterations for the space, and also working with an acoustic consultant to make sure that we are meeting the acoustic needs of the space. This project is awesome because it's not only for City Hall, it's also like a symbol of Durham, you know, giving a crap about acoustics in general. Because like right now, like the downtown scene is like, it's very similar to like the warehouse district here in Raleigh, where it's just really difficult to spend time in those spaces. So I'm really proud of Durham for investing into, you know, accessibility in this way. One thing I want to mention here is that I am currently looking for an artist mentee. This project is, I believe it's a $66,000 project for artist fee and fabrication, consulting, and installation. And there's also $1,000 in there for an artist mentee. So if you know of anyone, you have to live in Durham and you have to be over 18 years old. Durham resident over 18. And then, yeah, I'm looking for someone to help me with this project and help me with a number of things, maybe social media, but also just like someone I can teach, you know, about design, and then also be like hands-on during the installation process and really understand how it comes together. So please share this. I'm going to share my socials after at the end. And if you can share this opportunity with anyone you know in Durham who might be interested, or if you are interested in living in Durham, yeah, give it a look-ski. If you are here or you know someone who is here, the deadline is tonight at midnight. So if you can't meet that, just DM me and I will try to give you like some more time because I'm literally just telling you about this now. It's been out there for a couple weeks, but I can't expect anyone here to have known about it. So this, and then I have one other project that I'm currently working on that's coming up. And then this project is the Prison Quilt Awareness Project. So during COVID, there are women who were incarcerated here in Raleigh decided to create a collaborative quilt using 1 year of incarceration to be represented by one square crocheted on this quilt. So each of these individual sections is one woman's years of incarceration. So for instance, someone who is incarcerated in Raleigh has been incarcerated for this many years. And the original quilt artists who put this project together, all of them except for one are now out of prison. My friend Violet was incarcerated for 24.9 years and is currently helping like basically like my client for this project. So I'm working on this with one other artist as co-lead, and we are creating a shipping container experience, which you'll walk into and be able to experience the commemoration of this quilt into a physical form that will last for decades rather than a crocheted quilt that may not last that long. So we're making it using a substrate that is routed, so a foam substrate that's routed, and then also overlaying it with mosaic onto those squares to make the expression. The idea is giving people a glimpse into what it's like to experience incarceration, in that you go in and we're having this experience be kind of dark. There's going to be a grate overhead. You're going to be able to experience a mirror wall on the left side and the prison quilt on the right side, or I guess the sculpture wall on the right side, and then have statistics about incarceration and all this information about the project, the original quilt project. And the idea is this compression and release. Like we're, approaching outdoors where it's spacious and we're unknowing, and then we go into the inside. It's supposed to be dark, like the diagram says, tight, stressful, we're in it, we're compressed, we're struggling, and then we experience the release on the other side. So the whole experience is to be a metaphor for incarceration. Now, the actual substrate of this, Jake and Emily are fabricating. So they're actually part of the project. And it is going to be ready to be seen at Benevolence Farms in Durham coming up in October. So it's like right around the corner. This will be like a public art project that any of you can go and see. And so I'd love for you to see it. So at the end, I'm going to include a QR code to sign up for my email newsletter. And I hope you will consider doing that because I'll be able to keep you in the loop on all of these projects. And also in the newsletter, I like to share my design thinking behind projects. So if you have been enjoying this presentation and the design ideas and the considerations that have come out of it, or you just want to keep in touch, I think that'd be great. And I'd love to keep in touch with you. Okay, so I just want to go over quickly what I consider to be my recipe for success with everything that I have shown you so far. This is going to be a little bit different for everyone, but I'm going to share what mine is. Also, this is a sketch that I made before I even started working in 3D. Yeah. All right, so for me, it's health first. So I'm prioritizing my exercise. I lift weights twice a week, and I play soccer 2 to 3 times a week. I've been building up to that for a long time. For a long time, I was not able to do any sort of exercise due to doctor's orders, but now here I am and just continuing to work at it and get bigger and stronger. Exercise, food, I'm prioritizing eating organic foods. I cook at home a lot. I make my own meals. I avoid all major allergens. And I generally just really prioritize, like in terms of like investment. Like I'm not a big like personal shopper. As you can see, I'm like wearing the same clothes as I did in that photo, but I invest in like eating good food. Like that's really important to me, is like get the quality of food. As you may or may not know, there's a lot of food in our system that is like, it has poison in it. Like we use pesticides, we spray our foods in the United States. Like these things are not allowed in other countries and they're allowed here. And so we have to be vigilant with what we put in our bodies all the time. Like it or not, unfortunately, we're just born into this. It's just what it is. And then also rest, like not just physical rest, but also mental rest, like giving myself time to just like take my stand-up paddleboard out and just like have like just moments in nature alone with myself and just allow myself that mental rest. I think is very, very important. Give myself days where I'm not working, because those honestly are the days when I have the best ideas, when I am not in it constantly thinking about it, trying to get it done, just on the grind, going here and there when I'm